Hey guys, welcome back to the Diet Doc Life Mastery Podcast. I'm Joe Klemczewski with Dr. Kori Probst. And Kori, I did you see Mr. Rogers yet, the movie?
No, I haven't,
Okay.
and it's at the top of my list because
All right.
okay, go.
Can I give you one little spoiler? Can I just kind of
Yeah.
describe a scene? Okay.
Yes.
I recently did a coaching summit, a coaching training in Nashville, and
Yep.
as we were sitting there, we were talking about some interpersonal client work. And I was telling the story with one of our coaches, and I said, this is the part of the movie that was like so gripping. I'm just like holding on to my chair, waiting to see what's going to happen. Like a Mr. Rogers movie, right? It's like
Yeah.
Jason Bourne. But so the whole storyline, Mr. Rogers is not necessarily the protagonist. It's this reporter who's doing this story for Esquire magazine, which is actually true. It's a true story that's happened. And he's like a total ass, and he's like an angry, mean person. His life is falling apart in general. And he is given this task of interviewing Fred Rogers.
Okay.
And so he automatically thinks this is all fake. Like nobody can be this nice. Nobody's this good of a person. So he's got that mindset going in. And at one point, he corners Mr. Rogers in his own apartment. And he's like, okay, let's just drop all the shit, all the pretense.
Drop the facade. Get real here.
Yeah, who are you? What is this for? Are you doing it just for the money? Are you manipulating kids? And at one point, he asks Fred Rogers about his own family. What about your kids? What about your kids' relationships? Do you parent them this way? Do you this? Do you that? Do that? And he starts pressing some buttons. And of course, from a cinematic standpoint, like they're getting closer and closer into Tom Hanks's face, and he's swallowing and he's retracting, and he's so uncomfortable. And this guy's being so brutal.
Yeah.
And you can tell there's something there. You can tell, parenting is hard. Just because I'm Mr. Rogers doesn't mean my family's perfect. But anyway, in this moment, and I verified that this thing happened. He's attacking Fred Rogers, and I'm just waiting for Fred to crack. Like he's gonna yell out and drop the F-bomb on this guy. He's gonna throw him out. He just paused, and I'm paraphrasing. I should have got the actual transcript, but he said, I really appreciate your perspective. That you've given me some things to think about, and it must be. It took a lot of courage for you to even ask me that question. And he immediately put it back to this guy, complimenting this guy's courage and bravery for asking the question and being such a good reporter. And I'm like, I would have, anybody else would have snapped the guy's neck. And I thought in that moment,
Get out of my face.
That is the most powerful thing you could ever do, is to not exert an external power against somebody, but to maintain your own power, to say, I am so secure in who I am that I can take that punishment and just compliment you in return. And it was genuine. It wasn't like a manipulation. So, Kori, you're a psychologist. What does it take to have that kind of inner power and security?
It's a big heart. It's a very open heart. There's a quote by Epictetus that might put this in context. Of one thing, beware, O man. See what is the price at which you sell your will. If you do nothing else, do not sell your will cheap. And this means don't give away your power. Mr. Rogers wasn't willing in that moment, and it sounds like he's in a space in his life and in a space of awareness and open-heartedness that it's not even necessary. This guy could do what he was doing, and it didn't need to affect him. He didn't need to take it personally. He was so, I think, well associated and had processed for himself who he is, what life means to him, how he wants to show up in the world, that none of what this man was saying threatened him at all.
Can I make a comment on something? I want to get your take on it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have previously thought this is some super advanced, like you really have to learn this. You've got to go up to a Buddhist mountain, and 20 years later you could be like Mr. Rogers.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, his background was, as a child, he was bullied, and he was in a very conservative home, 1950s ish, and he was an only child. So he retreated from this bullying, almost like somebody who had experienced much more substantial abuse. And he had these puppets, and he would make these make-believe lands, and that's how he would self-soothe. He was just relentlessly bullied at school, actually for being overweight and just physically ostracized. And so he would make up this world, and like you and I have talked about before, how parts of people's brains, it's almost like a guillotine comes down at that moment of trauma, and you cease to grow. You can't get over that obstacle.
Development halts. Yeah.
And that made him develop this skill that he never lost, which was, I know what it's like to be a child and bullied and not respected. And I will make sure every child I ever encounter never feels that way. I will make every child understand that they have this kind of power. And when you go back and you look through the kind of themes that he taught through, it wasn't that he just got down on a child's level, but he elevated them to his level. And I don't think you get that from learning advanced psychology. It's almost that he was stunted as a child. He was so traumatized in that role that he stayed there, and he didn't want to leave the presence of other children. And even in his interactions with adults, there was this childlikeness that he brought to those interactions that, like, you just don't see. We forget that. We leave it behind in childhood. And his pain was an incredible gift.
Yeah. So, I mean, he was giving the children a voice because he didn't have one, it sounds like. But when you said that, like, he created puppets and things, and that's how, when he was a child, how he soothed, that right there, what you just said, is incredibly powerful, because a lot of children are in situations where they don't have anything with which they can use to soothe. And I don't know what, like, if he had the puppets as the bully and the person being bullied, and he got to make them communicate, and, he got to do with the puppets what he couldn't do in real life, I don't know. I haven't seen it. I want to.
Well, this is a whole nother topic for another day, but here's what made me think that this wasn't like he was just some super gifted child psychology wonder.
Oh, yeah.
Even in his parenting of his own kids, when things got tough, he would hide behind the puppets. He would.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what made me realize that he truly was stunted. Like, he could not even face conflict as a parent without parenting through those puppets. So that's what I mean by he had a deep seated trauma that he carried through his entire life, which is something, not to say, wow, that's something that I wish he could have healed in himself, but he used it to bring so much incredible insight to other people.
But so when he's being interviewed, he didn't have a puppet, right?
He did.
That he could pull out of his pocket.
And that's where that reporter made him put him down.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. But in the documentaries, so there's the Mr. Rogers movie, Tom Hanks, but then there's this, Netflix, Amazon documentary where it's actually Mr. Rogers. Like, you see 3 hours of his life. And that's when his adult sons, who are now, probably older than us, they told these things.
Okay.
Like, they loved their dad. Their dad was great. But here's some stuff you just might not know.
We have some juicy things to reveal here. As I'm thinking about this, Joe, so, God, that's just so interesting, but it's a great metaphor. All of us have a puppet. There's something that we hide behind to protect ourselves, to stay comfortable and soothed, and it may be food, it may be drugs, it may be alcohol, it may be shoplifting. We all have a puppet.
And when we feel we have to hide behind it, that is giving up our power of saying, I don't need this. I can be secure and I can own this. I can, I just don't have to hide.
I can own this. And oftentimes it's unpleasant or uncomfortable emotions that lead us to that place where we feel like we need to pull the puppet out of the pocket. I'm thinking of a Zen quote right now that kind of goes along with this. And this is in line with what we learn as we're progressing from not using the puppet as a crutch. Call it a crutch, call it our protector, call it the way in which we are caring for ourselves, but that needs to be shifted into a more skillful, effective way. But it goes, when it rains, let it rain. And when it blows, let it blow. And the point is that we need to focus on what we have a measure of influence over. So oftentimes what we'll do is, in an unpleasant or uncomfortable situation, an emotion arises and, like, we notice it, we recognize it, and we're like, oh God, okay. The first part is the recognizing. That's the first arrow. Oh, this is uncomfortable, not pleasant. Like, the second arrow, this is in Buddhism, there's two arrows. One is the emotion itself. The second one is, get this away from me. So we hurt ourselves twice. It already hurts to have an unpleasant emotion. Then we hurt ourselves again. We let go of that second arrow by saying, no, this is bad, get it away, make it change. And so we create, through the resistance, a greater amount of suffering, again, giving away or cheapening our will. If we can reside with that, just number one, reside in the feeling, and not tell a story around it and make it worse with that second arrow, we come to a more sort of intelligent approach. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, this is a story that I will stick with me forever. And I'm almost looking forward to conflict. Like, I want to go pick a fight with somebody just
right?
so I can act like Mr. Rogers, because I want to feel what it feels like to not give away power to what that scene really taught me is that it's a level of security. Not giving up my power is what you said. Just let it be. If it rains, it rains. I'm going to let that person be exactly who they are. Let them express exactly who they are. Mm-hmm. And then I will be okay being present with that. Yeah. Instead of thinking about me, just say, wow, that must have been difficult for you. I really appreciate that. Or if they're insulting me, to be able to say what he said, to say, wow, I really appreciate you giving me that perspective. That is something I'm going to definitely think about.
Yeah.
Instead of just reacting in anger and fighting back, like when you maintain that center of power, mm-hmm. do you realize what you've just done to that other person? Like, how could they possibly respond in a negative way? Like, you have just completely dismantled their entire existence in their own mind. Like, they're gonna walk away thinking, what just happened?
Well, Mr. Rogers didn't walk into that room and sit down with a gun. He didn't have any weapons. There were no weapons there that he could pull out and immediately shoot to use against this person. And
he could, psychologically, he could have completely destroyed this guy because he knows what kind of life he was living, and his life was in shambles, mm-hmm. which is why you got to see the story. The whole story is great. You got to go see the movie.
Yeah, I for sure will. Maybe to make this really practical, I think Mr. Rogers does a good job of it. A lot of us haven't experienced something as terrible as that and using such a weapon. I don't know. Maybe a lot of us have. But I'm working right now with, this is a highly intelligent woman. She's super charismatic, and she's in med school right now. And she's been talking to me recently about how, and I can see this in her face and her body language, how incensed she is with her attendings and the doctors that are teaching her. And their behavior has become, her focus of attention. And she can't control their behavior. Just like Mr. Rogers couldn't control this guy's behavior. He was going to say what he was going to say and say it the way he was going to say it. These doctors that she's being trained by, same thing. She can't control that. And yet that's the focus of her attention. All of her energy is directed towards, I need to make this stop, their behavior, not attending to what's inside. And this level of intensity that arises up inside of her when they say something that she doesn't want them to say or doesn't expect them to say. So she's got this idealized version of what they should be doing and how they should be speaking to her. And I just love the word ideal or idealization, because essentially, by definition, something that's ideal is unattainable. It's like perfection. We walk into so many situations in our lives with an idealized version of how things are going to be and how they should be. And when we do, we're oftentimes very, very disappointed, because that's not reality, right? So of the circumstances that she finds herself in, what we're working on together is her shifting her attention towards what she can control. And just like Epictetus would say, what the Stoics would say is, and then we let the universe run as it will. That's what Mr. Rogers did. He didn't get all incited and have to protect himself. Like, he let the universe run as it would. He let it happen. He wasn't in danger. There was nothing going to happen to him in that moment. As an adult, like the guy that he was with was a bully. He was bullying Mr. Rogers, but he'd learned how to soothe himself, and he had the skills to be able to do things in a different way and more effectively and not take it personally and as an affront to his power, his will, and who he is as a person now.
And more so in that security, there is a part of just being okay, letting go of anxiety and just letting the universe do what it will. But it goes a step further in that even under that barrage of attacks, he was thinking, how can I improve the life of this person? It was not even just, I'm going to let go of self-protection. It was
level.
Yep. And that's like that. This is a guy that needs to be studied. Like people could really learn what it's like to be that selfless.
And that's compassion right there.
Absolutely. He's immediately
I want the best for this person,
looking for the person who's attacking. You had a post about this the other day about what it's like for somebody. If somebody's attacking you, they're in pain. They're hurt. And instead of you punching back, maybe like Mr. Rogers, you could actually let that go and start helping them with their pain. And that's when the world changes. We
look underneath the words and the actions to the heart of the person. Yeah.
All right. Well, we let this go a little out of hand, Kori, but I had fun. I hope, probably everybody stopped listening 10 minutes ago. But anyway, anybody who's still listening, thank you for hanging in there with us and learning all about Mr. Rogers and how to maintain your power. That's what's so important, is this is how you can maintain who you are and go that next step and help other people actualize the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
All right, guys, we will see you next time in the Life Mastery Podcast. We hope you can take some of this and make the world a better place.
Thanks, guys.